Thank you very much. Welcome everyone to the RFP webinar for this new initiative of BIGD funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's called WEE-DiFine. So today we are really going to talk primarily about the RFP process and answer some of your questions around the RFP. We really want, really good proposals. So we really want to talk about the RFP, but we want to also talk about the research agenda itself. And there is a white paper that is on our website, but we also want to talk about the white paper so that you also get a sense of, what the overall thrust of the research agenda here is and what type of questions we're interested in. So that's the purpose. So welcome everyone. So my name, just to introduce ourselves, so my name is Imran Mateen. I'm the Executive Director of BRAC Institute of Governance and Development. Along with me, I've got Munshi Sulaiman. He is an advisor to BRAC Institute of Governance and Development, but also he leads BRAC International's independent evaluation and research cell. And he's also an advisor, not an advisor, he's also a member of the commissioning board of the WEE-DiFine project. We also have two other colleagues from BIGD. We have got Khandakar Wahidur Rahman, he's a research fellow at BIGD, and Noreen Khan, who is the communication manager of the WEE-DiFine Initiative of BIGD. Just a few words from me, just to frame before I hand over to Munshi Sulaiman to actually present the white paper. So just a few words about BIGD. So BIGD is essentially, I think the way to think about BIGD is we're a public policy stroke development studies institute. So we are both a research institute and a postgraduate teaching institute. So we have got, our research program is primarily focused on generating multidisciplinary, high quality evidence and insights around social science issues to improve development and governance outcomes of the country. And we also run a number of postgraduate programs as well, and constantly trying to connect the two. BIGD is part of BRAC University. We are independent from BRAC, the NGO, but we are part of the overall BRAC family. And we are part of BRAC University, but autonomous, we hold autonomous status within BRAC University as an institute. So about WEE-DiFine, so WEE-DiFine stands for Women's Economic Empowerment and Digital Finance, is actually part of a much larger research ambition, I would say, that BIGD has in terms of driving a research program around social science of digitization. There are a number of other research programs we have around the social science of digitization, and WEE-DiFine is a part of that overall research ambition that BIGD has. We really want to ensure that the digital possibilities actually end up creating impact for poor people and changing their lives and transforming, their overall situation. So that's the overall ambition. Within that, WEE-DiFine is focusing on to sort of generate a comprehensive body of evidence around the impact of digital finance and women's economic empowerment. But what we're really interested in is not a black box approach to the impact, and we'll talk much more about that. The whole initiative is focused around not only generating causal evidence, but actually generating causal evidence around around the important mechanisms through which digital finance impacts women's economic empowerment. So that's the whole idea, and that's the exciting part of the overall research thrust. It's really unpacking the black box to really do research rigorous research to really look at causal mechanisms and pathways through which this particular transmission between digital finance impact and women's economic empowerment can actually happen. We are obviously sort of ultimately interested in seeing how this body of knowledge can help better design of digital financial service interventions. That's what we ultimately design. So we're interested in influencing design of digital finance intervention. So that is the overall, kind of the ambition of this initiative, and we'll hear a lot more about it. We'll also talk about the RFP that's already been launched, about the procedural and the process elements of that, and we have got colleagues who will basically discuss that. So I don't want to talk anymore. I think just another point. I think especially I think it's very important that we connect things and look at things from a COVID lens. And I think it's really, really important to sort of acknowledge that the importance of digital finance and digitization in general, in terms of actually service delivery, has been really I think brought to the fore, if you like, during this COVID crisis. And we also know, in the context of Bangladesh and many other countries, this is the period where I think digital financial inclusion has taken on a whole different level. Now, whether they're going to be meaningful or not, how we can make them meaningful, how we can make them actually matter in terms of changing people's lives, and especially lives of poor women, and empowering them economically is sort of ultimately a question of how we design things better. And this research is primarily focused on answering those questions. I'll basically ask at this stage for Munshi to sort of take us through the white paper. Munshi, over to you.
Thank you, Imran Bhai. Thanks for setting up the scene. So I think I'll skip the background of WEE-DiFine that you have covered very well, and I'll straight jump into the causal mechanisms and what we mean by that, and what we have found in the white paper from the evidence review, and what we thought are potential priority questions that could be relevant and interesting for both WEE-DiFine and the researchers. So a couple of sort of background methods that are not here necessarily as slides, but when we did the evidence review, we tried to look at the research that used some sort of DFS, digital financial service, as an intervention, and look at different outcomes, and at least one of them is related to women's economic empowerment. And as we know, the women's economic empowerment can be defined broadly and cover a lot of aspects that also touches on elements of intervention. So, for example, financial inclusion in itself, sometimes considered women's economic empowerment, but for us, that is more of an intervention, and we look at the downstream effects on women's empowerment. A few concepts that we tried to, as we sort of reviewed the evidence, we tried to come up with a conceptual framework, and I'll go over that quickly before going into the priority questions. So in terms of women's economic empowerment, we tried to sort of look at two different models of how women's economic empowerment can be captured. One is if DFS can increase women's bargaining power within households. That can happen if in the sort of standard economics model, if there is a change in the outside option, that can lead to more bargaining power for women. But we also know without changing outside options, women can also have ability to enact her preferences in household decisions, which could be because of her sort of ability to bargain, or maybe spouses' willingness to bargain with an empowered woman, etc. So sort of in terms of model or ways, we thought these are the two broad ways women's economic empowerment can be looked at. Now, how does DFS feed into this? And we try to put it into sort of 3 different channels, as we call them. One is DFS, or different digital financial services. Primarily it's mobile money for sort of obvious reasons. It's quite popular and easy, and sort of it has been scaled up rapidly. So, for example, mobile money becomes a vehicle for financial inclusion for women. So it's not necessarily something unique about sort of DFS that brings change, but it works as a mechanism or sort of platform to deepen financial inclusion. And if that is the case, then we know from financial inclusion literature what are the effects on women's economic empowerment. There is a big literature, so we can sort of connect it through that way, that if DFS leads to greater gender equity in financial access. But the second part is probably the more interesting and related to the design aspects that Imran Bhai said, is what we call the technology features or technology-induced changes. So conceptually, we may think that DFS, mobile money, is just a platform to offer credit. But when we do that, obviously it comes with a lot of other differences. So it differs in terms of privacy, safety, and different other elements from, let's say, analog or cash. So in order to unpack the causal mechanisms, we thought it would be really useful to see what are the technology-induced changes that strengthen or weaken women's economic empowerment. And finally, sort of the third channel is kind of a spillover effect, where we thought if DFS or different digital technologies are used for financial services, there could be potential to provide non-financial services that sort of foster women's economic empowerment. So all of these we try to sort of put together in this conceptual framework, whereby DFS at the top leads to any of the 3 changes: channels, change in financial inclusion, technology-induced changes, or digital non-financial services. But one sort of underlying theme there is we believe there has to be something different between men and women. So, for example, if financial inclusion changes for both men and women, and there is no gender differential for DFS, then it's harder to expect different outcome in terms of women's economic empowerment. And the same goes for the other 2 channels. And then as we go down, it can be bargaining power or women's ability to enact their preferences that we sort of consider as women's economic empowerment. And as we zoom into these technology-induced changes, which are probably more sort of finer understanding of DFS, we try to put them to sort of into different things. So one is privacy, whereby if DFS can provide women greater privacy vis-a-vis men, that can lead to greater women's economic empowerment. The other channels are opportunity cost of time, velocity of transfer, which is sort of an area where we have seen a lot of evidence already that access to mobile money helps with risk sharing, maybe not at the pandemic level, but before the pandemic. How much of that sort of differs between men and women, or at least helps women, that is yet to be seen though. Then transaction cost, behavioral influence is something we thought is related to sort of helping women to plan better, or mental accounting, all those sort of things that have been done on financial inclusion, but might possibly be used more and more easily under DFS. Systematic discrimination, by that we mean if there is a sort of test-based discrimination because by the service providers, and digital technology and just the numbers can counteract that, then there could be reduced systematic discrimination, but it can go the other way as well. Then final 2 are safety and mobility. So that's kind of the overall framework, but of course for individual studies, we hope that each individual study will try to look at specific mechanisms. So this is kind of one simple schematic where mobile money leads to differences in privacy. Let's say it's better privacy for women, that leads to bargaining power, and that is women's economic empowerment. It can be a little bit sort of complicated. Mobile money that leads to digital credit or liquid money that can lead to occupational change. You can think of a couple of sort of intermediate channels between those two, although there are some evidence that we have found, and sort of in the white paper we cover, where DFS caused some occupational change for women. So this is kind of an overall summary in terms of mechanisms. We thought privacy is a very promising area. Opportunity cost of time, social support network to cope with shocks, transaction costs. There are quite a bit of evidence around these areas, but limited in when we look for evidence around differences between men and women to reflect on women's economic empowerment. Behavioral influence, although there are a couple of studies that are using sort of nudges of different sorts, this is probably we found it relatively unexplored. Safety, similar to privacy, we thought it's a very promising area. Money and labor supply is also sort of, there is generally positive effects, but we need more clearer understanding. If you refer to the sort of white paper, you'll see we have tried to come up with some questions as we discussed evidence on each of these themes. But I would say that these are sort of one way we try to frame the questions, but I don't think the researchers would need to feel constrained by those framing of the questions, as long as it is relevant to the causal mechanisms. I think that is what WEE-DiFine is excited about. Finally, on the opportunity for the future research and then sort of segue to give it to my colleagues, is we have 3 different windows. Experimental and extension, these are primarily RCTs, where we want to support these studies that will unpack these different mechanisms that we have talked about. At the same time, it's kind of important to remember that we don't necessarily need to think about DFS as a silver bullet and it'll solve all problems of women's economic empowerment. We know there are a lot of other interventions going on. So if we can see DFS playing a strong complementary role, that will also be useful. On the measurement, I'll sort of, the last minute, the important thing to highlight here is we found so quite often we take household decisions as outcomes or sort of proxy for women's economic empowerment, but trying to think of this framework or causal mechanisms, we felt the need for finer understanding of how to distinguish enacting someone's preferences versus bargaining power versus more spending on children's education being a proxy for women's economic empowerment. So there could be sort of measurement studies like that. So that's kind of coming back to WEE-DiFine the objectives, as we have talked about, and geographical focus is in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. I think I'm a little bit over time, so I'll give it now to Wahed to get into the RFP that I'm sure people are more interested about.
Thank you, Munshi Bhai. So, thank you, Munshi Bhai. Thank you, Munshi Bhai. So the RFP is online, and we are going to go through the steps of the application process of the RFP. But before that, I would like to show you what the RFP is, where you can find it, what it is all about, what are the types of studies we are going to. I will elaborate a little bit on the type of the studies we are going to fund, and the rationale behind the way we have the RFP designed. So as you can see on your screen, this is the RFP is on our website. If you go to our website on programs, you'll find WEE-DiFine and there is this tab of request for proposals. If you click on it, it will take you to the RFP. One quick side note that everyone who are planning to submit for submit proposals should take a look at the white paper. You should consult with the white paper. That kind of gives the context of where we are coming from and what are the types of questions. Certainly not limiting the types of questions, but gives you an understanding of what are the types of questions this initiative is willing to fund. So under the RFP tab, you see we have two RFPs. We have the main RFP and we have another small rolling RFP. So I'll go in the details of what are the two RFPs. So the main RFP is basically for is a large grant, and it's for either of two kinds of studies. One is large greenfield randomized control trials. So it's essentially undertaking a new RCT with an intervention in mind, with a design in mind, and the maximum award for that category is $500,000 US. Then we have the extension of existing study, which is an extension to an RCT that's going on to either increase a treatment arm or to expand your sample. So essentially an extension of a rational kind, and the maximum award for that category is $200,000 US. The deadline for this main RFP is November 25th, 2020. For those who are in the US, this is just the day before Thanksgiving. Then we have the small grant RFP, and under the small grant RFP, we have three kinds of studies that we are going to fund. So the one is we're going to fund pilot studies. So a large scale RFP that you're planning to do. If you're going to do a pilot before that, which is probably a good idea, this you can submit proposals under that category, and the max grant for that is $50,000 US. Then we have a measurement experiment category. This is to support measurement experiments in field surveys. This will help us understand how to effectively measure something like financial inclusion or women economic empowerment. For this category, also the maximum amount is $50,000 US. We also have a qualitative extension to an existing or large scale RCT. For that category, this is essentially if for an RCT study, if the research team wants a qualitative extension to understand the process or better or explain the results better, you can apply for funding under that category. And so for all these three, the maximum award is $50,000 US, and there is it's a rolling basis application process. So there is no deadline per se for this. The caveat is that for pilot and qualitative extension, for the qualitative extension, it has to be an extension of an existing study or part of a large-scale RCT that you are going to do in the field. For the measurement experiment, it can be either an add-on to a large-scale study or can be a study by itself. So that's the difference between this main RFP and small grant RFP. One fundamental difference is the maximum award that you can get. The other is that for the main RFP, the deadline for this round is 25th of next month, while for the small grant is a rolling base. I want to explain a little bit about what's the role of BIGD in this. So BIGD is going to facilitate. BIGD is going to do a review process of the proposals that we get, And based on that review and applying their own judgment, our advisory board will make decisions about which projects should be funded or not. So BIGD is not responsible for finding an implementing partner for the research team. However, BIGD has its own network through which we are happy to provide matchmaking help if it is within our network and within our capacity. Also, the BIGD, so we understand this is attractive to researchers across different countries, and different universities of the world will have different types of IRB requirements. So BIGD is not responsible for managing those IRB processes. The researchers and their research implementing partners are responsible for managing the IRBs. So that's, I just wanted to make clear that BIGD is not intervention, is not necessarily the intervention partner or is responsible for finding one. But we are certainly happy to help when it is within our reach. For the research fund, this fund will be used for research purpose. This is not going to be used for intervention itself. So for that reason, it's it's very unlikely that there isn't going to be an intervention partner with a proposal, since this money is not going to be used for intervention itself. So on that, I would request Noreen to explain the application process.
Thank you so much, Wyatt. Hi, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to start with just helping everyone navigate through our website and lead us to all the resources that we can find for WEE-DiFine. And then I will run through the RFPs themselves to help everyone understand the process and the resources required to apply. So this is our BIGD webpage. Let's hit programs. Under programs, we can find WEE-DiFine. And this brings us to the WEE-DiFine webpage. So we have an about section that gives us an overview of the initiative, which Dr. Imran Mateen has gone through. Then we have a section on the white paper, which also provides an overview of the white paper and also the attachment to the white paper for download. And then finally, we have our RFP tab. This has an overview of the differences between the main RFP and the small grants RFP that Wahid has just described. And we do have an application instructions tab in the end, followed by an RFP package. So this is where we'll find all the resources for our application. We have the main RFP, the small grants RFP. We've also provided a budget template to submit with the application, and we've also provided a link to the white paper for reference. Now, if we click on the main RFP, I will just run everyone through what the overview is and what the eligibility criteria is for applications and so on and so forth. So here we have a little overview on our initiative. The highlighted points here are the deadlines, and we also provided a link for the submission portal. So following COVID, we actually do have a spot in the application where we encourage or where we actually require applicants to really outline some details of how they intend to address the new ever-changing COVID-related constraints that we've been having to deal with on a global basis. And these might be anywhere from facing delays in studies or processes or any adaptation that's required from the part of the researchers in order to implement research studies or any safety or health precautions that are necessary for research subjects. Therefore, applicants are required to submit a small summary of their COVID-19 contingency plan. So we have an overview of BIGD here. More information obviously is available on the BIGD website in detail. We also have an overview of the initiative and all the details necessary to really understand what kind of research we're looking for. Of course, more details are available in the white paper. We have a regional focus as well. The regional focus of the WEE-DiFine Initiative is South Asia, with special focus on Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan, as well as countries in sub-Saharan Africa. I won't go through this section because Wahid has in detail described what categories of funding are for the main RFP, but we've really isolated this RFP to really focus on large-scale evaluations or an extension to a large-scale evaluation. And this extension can be in terms of expanding sample size, or it can also be in terms of expanding a new treatment arm that adheres to some of the questions that we would like to answer in terms of evaluating impact of DFS on WEE. The maximum award for the fundings are also outlined here. Eligibility. Okay, so we encourage researchers from higher education institutes as well as nonprofit research institutes to apply for funding. Graduate students, moreover, who are working with research advisors are also eligible to apply and are also encouraged to apply. We do accept proposals submitted by individual researchers. However, it's under exceptional circumstances and only when the researcher in question has demonstrated a high record of high quality research. However, we encourage any researchers interested to communicate with us and to contact us through our contact channel to really move this forward, because we're willing to work with individual researchers as well. Single institutions are encouraged to apply, and moreover, there can also be multiple proposals in the same call. Institutions can also partner with other institutions to apply for a proposal, to submit a proposal. However, we do require that one institution identifies themselves as a lead institution. Okay, we have actually designed a template for the technical proposal for everyone to make it really easy to submit information, the key and the essential information required for the proposal. So we start with an introduction with all the project details and also details of the researchers and the institutions applying. In section 2, we require a really detailed account of the research itself in terms of context, problem statement, how the study is relevant to our initiative, which is the WEE-DiFine Initiative, what kind of academic contribution the study can put forward into the literature that currently exists under WEE-DiFine, what kind of stakeholder engagement as well. We also require a section on the research design, what kind of intervention the researchers are proposing, what kind of methodology that they're planning to use, and some more technical details with regards to power calculations. What's important to highlight here is the mitigating risk section, because this is where the researchers are encouraged to outline any COVID-related risks that have arisen and how to mitigate against these risks, as well as any other risks anticipated throughout the course of the research. Information on the study population and expected outcomes and timelines. In section 5, we also have an additional section which complements the budget and the budget template that we've provided. We do require that applicants provide us with a budget narrative or a summary that really details the major costs outlined in the budget. We also have a section on the budget guidelines where applicants can find information on how to fill out the budget Excel sheet that has been provided in the RFP tab of our website. Something important to note is that if applicants do have any co-funding, applicants are required to provide information on the co-funding and whether the funding has already been secured. Moving forward, Wahid has also kind of touched up on the review process. So I'm just going to talk about this a little bit more. We actually have a 3-stage review process. The first stage is where the WEE-DiFine team will evaluate proposals based on the eligibility criteria that we've provided and also do a quality assessment. And afterwards, the proposals will undergo a peer review evaluation. And finally, the selected proposals will be put forward to an advisory board or a commissioning board who will make the final decision in collaboration with the BIGD leadership team to determine successful proposals. I would like to say at this point that BIGD strictly adheres to the rules of impartiality during its evaluation process, and provisions have been put in place to ensure that all decision-making is fair and transparent. We do have a grant deliverables section where applicants can find a detailed outline of all the deliverables that they are required to submit throughout the duration of the research process. Something to highlight in this section is for large-scale greenfield evaluations and for extension evaluations, we do require as a final output that applicants have put forward a publication quality working paper with a clear path towards publication in a leading economic or policy journal. Of course, this publication has is heavily related to the mechanisms and the questions that are put forward by the WEE-DiFine Initiative that this initiative seeks to answer. Finally, we have a short section on exactly how the BIGD and WEE-DiFine team want these submissions. In this point, I will show you the grant application portal, which looks like this. And we have, so we require the technical proposal, the budget Excel sheet, letters of support, and CVs of all the researchers. And we do have an annex, which is a proposal cover sheet. However, I'd like to clarify that this is only a reference document, and all the components of this reference cover sheet will be filled out in the portal right here. So there is no need to submit the proposal cover sheet as is, because all the information will be submitted through the portal as is. I will also very quickly go through the small grants RFP, although most of the sections are the same. However, because the funding of the measurement, the qualitative and the pilot studies are much smaller, we don't require such a detailed technical proposal. So we have provided a much more basic guideline or a much more basic template and a much more shorter template for applicants who wish to apply for these smaller grants. And just the difference between these two RFPs that I would like to highlight for all the researchers is that in terms of the grant deliverables, they are also significantly shorter than the main RFP grant deliverables, mainly being the final report. We understand that due to the size of the funding and the design of these funds, which are more pilot studies or measurement studies or qualitative studies, we understand that it's not possible to have a publishing quality document, but we do want a final report that is aimed at presenting the research project in detail with a high degree of clarity and understanding of the issues outlined and put forward in the initiative. So thank you. I will now move it over back to Wahed, who is going to give you a brief outline on some of the questions that we'll be facing, that we have already faced. And at this moment, if you do have any questions regarding the RFPs, I would encourage you to submit your questions in the Q&A panel, and we will answer all of the questions at the end of the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Noreen. So we will cover some questions that we think are going to be asked quite frequently. And some of the questions that we already see on our Q&A box kind of validates the selection of those questions. And after this, we will answer any other question that you have already sent us and we haven't answered, or we will receive questions from you if time permits. So, so Noreen, should your questions.
Yes.
Yeah. So one question obviously we saw is coming is who can apply for funding, and the answer is that we are looking for higher education institutes and non-profit research institutes to apply for this. And by this, we mean the researchers who are working in these institutes applying for funding. So graduate students are welcome to apply. However, we would require them to partner with a research advisor to be eligible. For research, we will be, as I was mentioning earlier, that the money that through this initiative that the recipients will be awarded can be used for research purpose only, and we are not going to fund any implementation of program. If you have any further questions, please communicate with us in the email address here. So do you need a partner for a large-scale study? So so while it is not mandatory that you have to have, but it's very unlikely that a successful proposal with an interesting question and a feasible research strategy will not have one, since the question that we are asking, the large context that we're working on requires typical intervention with the help of intervening partners. So in terms of the nationality of co-PI, we do not require that at least there has to be one co-PI who is of nationality of the country that's being studied. With that said, there is a requirement. You will need some partnership and connection to the country of interest to ensure that the research can be accomplished, and you will find all the supports and resources required to implement the intervention, do data collection, and you can receive all sort of approvals required to do those things. So one question we have already received a few times, which is how quality researchers can get involved, given that most of our focus is on RCTs. So ideally, we are looking for proposals of quality studies that are in collaboration with potential RCT projects or existing interventions. We suggest that quality researchers who are interested in this initiative reach out to economists or other researchers who work on similar issues, and see if there is a potential for collaboration there.
And on that note, I would also like to add that the qualitative RFP is a rolling RFP, so there is no specific deadline. If applicants feel, if researchers feel that down the line in the WEE-DiFine initiative that there is an active research where a researcher can collaborate and add a qualitative component, please do feel free to get in touch with the WEE-DiFine team, and we will be happy to connect researchers. Yes, so is co-funding required for large-scale greenfield evaluations? No. However, as I mentioned during the RFP, if there is co-funding, we do ask that you submit all the details of the co-funding organization the amount, and whether the co-funding has already been secured or not. Some of the information we've already gone through, but I'll say that again. We have extended our deadline for the main RFP. It is now the 25th of November, 2020. And the small grants RFP will remain rolling as before. Funding decisions will be made about 4 to 6 weeks after the deadline for the main RFP. And for rolling submissions, we'll notify researchers in about 4 weeks after the date of submission. I've talked a little bit about budget instructions, but some of the questions we do get we will get in this line is how detailed does the budget need to be? I would urge you all to just refer to the budget template and be as detailed as possible, because we do require information on how each cost is calculated along with the cost that you have highlighted. Especially if you're collecting primary data, please, we would like you to ensure that you do have provided the expected sample size in the budget summary section. Please also try to put a justification next to each cost, just as detailed as possible will obviously speed up the process much faster for us. We will also, BIGD also performs a thorough review of all the project costs that have been written, and they may be subject to negotiation if we feel that it's too high or different. How could we show that a third party, okay, so if there's third party involvement for any research, that's fine. But if you do plan to use a third party, please do give us details, indicate under which cost these third party costs are attributed to, and please do provide the name of the vendor, the supplier. If you have not subcontracted out yet, please put TBC. But if you have, please do provide some justification as to why this supplier has been chosen. As a standard, we have a 15% overhead that can be applicable to total expenditure directly, which is attributable to the project. When will the contract be signed? So, yeah, Wahid, over to you.
Yeah, so the contracts will be for the signature of a contract once a project has once the advisory board has decided that a project can get the funding, we will communicate with the research team with an expression of interest to fund, and the research team will have to do some due diligence process. With the completion of that due diligence process, contracts will be drawn up and sent for signatures. So for grant award payments, with a contract letter will state the process of payment, receipt, and W2 or W9 form, depending on who is going to be subgrantee, where the subgrant is going to be based at. Those forms are required to disburse payments. The number of installments of payments will be stated in the contract letter. And each installment of payment will be disbursed based on the confirmation of deliverables achieved by the recipient, as mentioned in the contract. So those will be described in the contract letter, the deliverables. For there are reporting requirements. All WEE-DiFine grants are required to submit a quarterly or half-yearly financial and technical report, and as well as an expenditure statement, which is compared with the initial budget. The contract letter will include the complete list of required reports and schedules for the submission, and these reports are due within 30 calendar days following the end of the reporting day. There are audit requirements as well. An audit of the project account is required once in a year by an enlisted external auditor, and all audit reports must be submitted to BIGD within the final 2 months of each financial year of the project. Please note that a financial year will start when the project starts, and BIGD reserves the right to review all records related to the project. Noreen, do you want to take it over from here?
Thank you. So as I mentioned in our RFP process, we do have a section where applicants are required to predict any upcoming or any foreseeable constraints to their study as a result of COVID, and also outline ways to mitigate or overcome those challenges. However, we understand that COVID is an ever-changing process, and if there are any further or any challenges that arise, we will handle it in a case-by-case basis. So this is more sort of related to an active running study that has been funded by WEE-DiFine, but in either case, we just encourage applicants to contact us if they want to directly communicate with us. We will handle it on a case-by-case basis. Wahid, I'll let you get this one. You're on mute.
Yeah. So can an award be suspended or terminated? An award may be terminated in the event of failure to comply with the terms and conditions of an award. Those terms and conditions will be, in the contract letter, and awards may also be terminated by mutual agreement between the recipient and BIGD. In the event of such termination, the recipient is not typically entitled to expend any more funds except to the extent required to meet commitments that in the judgment of BIGD had become firm before the mutually agreed upon date of the termination. And award recipient may also be request termination of all part of the grant by written request to BIGD. Next slide, please. So for IRB, researchers and their partners are expected to take care of IRB and provide documentation in support of IRB clearance. So this is not going to be BIGD's responsibility. Now, we have received some questions through our Q&A box. So we will try to answer the questions that we have not covered in our selected potential FAQ section. So we have few questions asking about the maximum length of the proposed project. So we do not have any, length of project written in stone. It's going to depend on the veracity of your proposal will rely on what the question you're asking, and if the intervention you're proposing is going to be able to disentangle any effect, if you have put enough sample, if you have enough power to answer that question, and the length of the project is going to be related to all those factors, right? So it's going to depend on the circumstance. It's the question you are asking, the intervention you are proposing. So that's going to dictate it. Noreen, do you have something to add on this?
Yeah, I would just also like to say that we do have various amounts of funding. So you can understand a large-scale Greenfield evaluation where the maximum budget is $500,000 is going to be a much longer project than one that is, for example, a qualitative or a pilot study that's budgeted at $50,000 max. In addition, I would also like to, again, reiterate that because of COVID, we do understand that some projects may be timelined in longer than what would be normal. And again, this is, completely fine as long as you account for this in the proposal and justify it and explain why the extra time is needed. I think that will be fine.
Yeah. So we have a couple of questions about who can submit. So just to reiterate, we expect individuals with institutional affiliations to submit for this grant, and by institution we mean higher education institute or non-profit research institute. Please remember, this is a funding for research activity only. This is not funding for an intervention or operation. If you want to apply for a fund, you will have to have a credential of being able to produce research output. That's the basically the criteria.
Also, I would just like to add, there is a question about team composition. I think the best thing would be for you to contact us on our email address, and if we can understand a bit more what it comprises of your team, we can direct you further. But as Wahid said, if a team composition consists of a research institution or an academic institution or an NGO, then it should be fine.
We have a few questions on the types of grant each entity, let's say, is allowed to apply for. So if you have interesting studies, you are allowed to apply for any of the study categories, or even combinations where they're allowed. So for instance, we have a question where a same organization can apply for a large scale study and also a small grant for measurement experiment. The answer is yes. Also, if you are interested in doing a combination of large scale RCT and the qualitative extension, you can apply for both of those two. So these categories, the linear combination, when it's allowed, you are allowed to apply for those categories, the combination of those categories. So we do mention, so we have a question about regional focus. So as Noreen mentioned during explaining the RFP procedures, that the two regions that we are focusing on through this initiative are South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. In South Asia, while we are interested in South Asia, we also have a little bit specific interest in Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. But we do not, you do not have to, in a study, include multiple countries just to be able to focusing on, have a regional focus per se. So the focus of the initiative is regional. Doesn't mean that each study funded under this initiative will have to focus on multiple countries, so that each study is also focusing on regions. So the goal of this initiative is to create a body of evidence on these regions, helped by potentially individual studies focusing on maybe even parts of each country, right? So you do not have to include multiple countries in your each proposal to check on that regional focus criteria. So in terms of, so we have a few questions in terms of questions asking when will the decisions be made. So for the for the main RFP, we expect to let the researchers know about an outcome within 4 to 6 weeks. And for small, we expect to make those decisions known in a 4-week timeline. So that's our plan. I think we answered. So we have an interesting question, which I want to take a little time to answer. So the question was whether a project design can look into women of different socioeconomic backgrounds and countries without necessarily looking into impact on men. So the answer, I would like to say is yes, as long as there is link to DFS and WEE. It's not necessary that you have to include men, but in your proposal you have to substantiate how your design is going to make that connection and going to going to be going to be consistent with the larger goal of this initiative. I think we have a couple of participants who were also in our last webinar. We had our initial deadline on November 12th. We have extended it to November 25th. So the current deadline for the main RFP is 25th of November. But please, for the small RFPs, it still remains rolling. Doreen, do you want to answer a few other questions?
Yes. So we have a question: are grants open for profit entities? Education, academic entities, yes, but otherwise it's going to be nonprofit. We also have a question about avoiding just one grant in each category or multiple grants within categories. Honestly, I think we will we're going to try to represent all the categories. However, it's going to be a competitive selection. So we will really, we're really trying to choose the strongest, the proposals that demonstrate the strongest possibility or the opportunity to be able to identify evidence that links DFS to WEE. So at the end of the day, it'll just depend on the strength of the proposals that we receive. But we are going to try regionally. We're going to try to represent everything. Are there any country preferences in SSA? Well, I mean, in terms of SSA, I mean, and when we think of DFS or digital finance, we do think of countries like Uganda, Nigeria. However, we don't at this moment have a preference. As I mentioned, we want to be representative in terms of the region, and we really want a quality proposal that aims to be able to answer some of the questions that we've put forward in the white paper and the initiative itself. If you have any follow-up questions about any particular country in particular, please do feel free to email us and we'll be happy to follow up there.
I think we have time for taking a couple of more questions. So I want to address one question about IRB. As I had mentioned before, that the researchers will be responsible for doing the IRBs. If you are doing a study in a country where PhD is present, so Bangladesh, we can help you in figuring out some of the steps, but you will be responsible for managing that process. And there's another question about whether this is only initiatives to fund studies by economists. So the question was that if this initiative is willing to, consider projects from social psychology with a live experiment. So the answer is that the goal of this is to be provide, as I said, a body of evidence, ideally coming from cross-discipline, using this technique that we have explained. And the strength of the proposal is going to be based on the question you're asking, the design you have to answer that question. The reviewers and board will take into consideration whether the approach is going to provide an answer strongly. And it doesn't matter if your goal is to not publish in any journal, so long as you are publishing somewhere so that it's a scientific evidence. So yeah, we really feel that this is a great opportunity for those who are not economists, but working with similar methods. Please apply for this funding.
I would also like to answer one. Yeah. I'd also like to address one question. Will there be any fee? Will will research look at how DFS features can increase women's uptake of financial services? Yeah, absolutely. If you do read through our white paper, we do explain how an increase in women's uptake on financial services can translate to WE, or women's economic empowerment. However, obviously with this issue, researchers need to look at reverse causality as well. But of course, this is an area of this is absolutely an area of interest to us. So we do urge you to explore this field. Thank you.
I think we are almost out of time, so I will request Imran Bhai to make his concluding remarks, and yeah, the floor is yours, Imran Bhai.
Great. No, thank you very much. I think that was quite comprehensive. You know, I think by way of conclusion, what I want to say is I hope, you know, you feel excited about this new initiative. I think we have been very thoughtful in terms of designing this in a way that really focuses on generating a comprehensive body of evidence on this particular link, which we think is critical in terms of realizing an opportunity of a inclusive economic infrastructure that I think digital finance does provide, and linking it up with women's economic empowerment, I think is sort of, I think, makes it really exciting and extremely relevant. So both from a intellectual excitement point of view, and also from a making the world a better place point of view, I hope we will generate a lot of excitement and a lot of interest, and I'm really looking forward to very high quality research proposals that will be submitted. We've also been very thoughtful in terms of methods. I mean, not in terms of method, but in terms of different discipline, but also a bit in terms of method. I mean, here we have been quite clear that we are interested in experimental methods that we think is the best method to be able to really tease out these mechanisms in a causal attributable way. However, we have been thoughtful in terms of also incentivizing very thoughtful, serious qualitative research integration that helps us understand some of these issues in a much more deeper way. So I hope you'll take advantage of that, because one of the big challenges of most of these, many of these, randomized controlled trial initiatives has been, a lack of focus in terms of incorporating qualitative methods, not in a serious way. And I hope in this initiative, we have designed it in a way to incentivize it, without kind of lip service to it. So I hope that we'll take advantage of that opportunity. And finally, I think what Wahid was talking about, that yes, we have a method preference here, but in terms of the different disciplines through which that method can be used, I think we're very, very open. So there are other disciplines beside economics where these type of sort of methods can also be applied. And if you looked at the white paper and Munsh's presentation, there are ample opportunities for those type of cross-disciplinary collaboration as well. And finally, we are interested in sort of generating a global body of evidence, particularly focusing on these two continents, or South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, because I think that's where most of poor people live, and where I think digital finance is making inroads, and where I hope that the evidence that we will generate can make a difference. So I'm really looking forward to great participation from all of you, and I hope you're excited and inspired. But if you have any questions, we're here to answer. We've got team members, Noreen, Wahed, and we've got others as well. So we're here to basically help and kind of answer any of your questions. The final point I want to make is really around whilst we don't want to take any, we don't take the responsibility of matchmaking between implementing organizations, because this really needs strong implementing organizations, practicing organizations, microfinance institutions or financial institutions, or maybe even government. What we will do is we will take an active interest in facilitating those type of partnership in Bangladesh, of course, where BIGD is based. Using our network, but beyond that, we also are part of other networks, and we will definitely be proactive in terms of facilitating that. But we're not taking the responsibility of that. But we are interested in sort of ensuring that those type of matchmakings sort of happen. So clearly we'll be working with you on that front as well, and try and provide as much support as we possibly can. So with that, thank you all very much for joining. Thank you.